Hey guys, welcome to episode 12 of the VoiceOver Roadmap podcast. On today's episode, we have a guest co-host, Marc Scott. Marc is a professional voiceover talent as well as a coach and an expert on marketing. So this is going to be a marketing heavy episode, but we also talk about some other things. And as always, we have our performance, audio, and business question. And if you would like to submit a question for a future episode of the show, you can do that at voiceoverroadmap.com/questions. And you can check out the show notes for this episode at voiceoverroadmap.com/012. And as always, you can listen to the show on iTunes, on YouTube, or right on the voiceoverroadmap.com website. And if you get a chance, I'd love for you to leave a review on iTunes. That goes a long way to helping the show be found and get out there. And you can always share the links to the podcast with your voiceover friends as well. So let's jump into episode 12 with guest co-host Marc Scott. Hey, Marc, how's it going?
It is going well, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for being here. So before we jump into our audience questions for this episode, what I usually like to do when there is a guest co-host is just first introduce you to the audience so people who aren't familiar with you can just kind of know a little bit about your history as it pertains to voiceover, how you got into it, the sort of things that you've done. So could you just give us a little quick overview and rundown of how you very first got started in voiceover at the beginning of your career?
Yeah, so I'm one of those guys that's a radio guy, which is a story that is commonly heard. I started in radio in 1995. I was actually in my grade 12 year of high school and started at a co-op at a radio station. And so by default, without even realizing it at the time, I was doing voiceover because the very first thing that I ever did in radio was voicing commercials and some of the different production elements before I was ever even on air. And so I didn't even realize it at the time that I was doing voiceover, but I came to realize it many years later. And so I did radio and television on and off for close to 20 years, but started pursuing voiceover as a part-time sort of deal. I'm going to say like 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there, I started kind of doing it part-time and then finally made the decision, or the decision perhaps was made for me when my last radio job came to an end to go full-time, and that would have been in 2012.
Okay, cool. And from the course of your career, from the beginning to now, what are some big moments that stand out to you? Are there any, whether it's, like a big job or a big project you landed, or maybe landing representation with a certain agency, are there any sort of big milestones that you hit that really stand out to you?
There are a couple. The first was being able to actually go full-time. Mm-hmm. For so many years, I wanted to be able to do it, but I was too afraid to try. And I really felt like I had what I needed to do to make it happen. I really felt like I had the background, the education, and the drive to be able to do it. But I was afraid. When you've got a regular, steady paycheck coming in, right? It's easy to just kind of settle into that regular, steady paycheck. Absolutely. And so in 2012, when I was downsized from the radio station that I was at, for the first probably week after that happened, I thought it was like the worst experience that ever happened to me in my entire life. But after a few months of sitting on the unemployment line and still being able to pay my rent, all of a sudden I kind of had an aha moment, probably about 4 or 5 months after I got downsized, where I was like, wait a minute, you're a full-time voice actor now and you didn't even realize it because I was paying my bills. And so that was a really exciting kind of revelation that for the first time in my life, I was my own boss. I joked. I had so many people that came to me when my last radio job ended, so many industry friends and stuff like that, offering me jobs and giving me new opportunities. And I told all of them from now on, the only idiot I answer to is me. And I was finally living that dream of being the only idiot that I had to answer to. So that was pretty amazing. And then I would say the second biggest milestone for me was in 2016, when it was in kind of the middle of September, actually very close to my birthday, when for the first time I crossed the $100,000 mark for voiceover income. Nice. And so that is something that I had been working towards and really believed that I could do. And so for the first time actually being able to do that, and knowing that I was earning more than 3 times what I was making in radio, not working nearly as many hours and having so much more fun doing it, that was one of those moments when I just sort of sat back and was like, man, I'm so blessed. Like I'm literally living the voiceover dream.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a full-time talent, do you sort of schedule your days and sort of make it like a, 9 to 5 kind of job, or do you kind of just work around, when jobs come in or when things are more appropriate day to day? How do you sort of, approach time management and scheduling and that kind of stuff?
So for the first couple of years that I was full-time, I was very, very intentional about my scheduling.
Hmm.
And the reason for that was because one of the lessons that I learned was that if you want to be a full-time voice actor, first you have to be a full-time marketer. And so I was very strict on myself, putting time blocks into my calendar, getting into the studio,
Right.
doing what I needed to do from a marketing standpoint, and making sure that those things were getting done. And that is what now the payoff has come a couple years later, where I have so much more freedom and flexibility in my day. I'm still intentional about getting into the studio and doing some work and answering emails, making marketing touches and all that sort of stuff, but definitely have so much more freedom and flexibility, which has been really nice because having just got married a couple of months ago, and now I've got a wife and I've got 2 kids, which is something that I never had before. And I'm kind of trying to figure out how this whole life thing works now that I'm not just a single guy living in my apartment. And then obviously I'm in the middle of home renovations and stuff. And so having that
Right.
freedom and flexibility now is amazing. So I still have to make sure that I'm getting in the office every day and doing the recording and all that sort of stuff and doing the marketing, but definitely a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, awesome. And last thing before we get into some more detailed questions that I have for you is just want to talk a little bit about gear, because that's, something that people can kind of get obsessed with. And it's always just kind of fun to hear what, pro talent, full-time talent are using. So before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about how you're going through some, transitions in regards to your studio space and your renovations and things like that. But let's just, I guess I'll phrase the question this way. When you are up and running with, a workable full-time studio, what kind of gear are you using? Your microphone, what's your space like, your interface? Just give us a little overview of that kind of thing.
Yeah, so in my apartment where I lived for many, many years prior to moving into this house back in the summer, I did have a second bedroom, which was set up as a proper studio / office space. So I have an iMac that I use with Adobe Audition. That is my recording software of choice. The Yamaha AGO3 is the interface that I'm using. I do have a Sennheiser 416 that I'm using now. At the time, my studio in my apartment was treated with various and assorted acoustic panels. I had cloud panels that hung from the ceiling and then panels that were attached to the wall. And so all of that stuff has still come with me.
Sure.
I'm just set up in a spare bedroom right now that ultimately will get demolished. But for now, there's just kind of there's stuff sitting in corners and whatever just to kind of control the sound a little bit. But one of the things that was really important for me was I do like to travel. I am on the road, whether it's a vacation, going to a conference or whatever. And so something that was really important to me was to be able to remain accessible to my clients and still have the ability to record while I was on the road, but also being able to keep a consistent sound.
Right.
And so the reason why I settled on the 416 and the AGO3 is small, very portable. I can take it with me. It fits in my carry-on. It works great. It sounds great. And then the 416 is one of the most forgiving microphones. I mean, I've used this microphone and I've recorded in hotels. I've recorded in the back seat of a car on the, pulled off on the side of the interstate.
Yeah.
Like I've used this microphone everywhere. And my clients can never tell the difference between whether I'm in my home studio space or whether I'm on the road or whatever. And so that was something that was very important to me. So, AGO3 for the interface, again, 416 for the mic. I use Rocket 6 KRK studio monitors, and outside of that, I don't have a whole lot of fancy bells and whistles. And,
you don't need
and
it.
I think that's also important for people to understand is that you don't need to have a whole lot of fancy bells and whistles to put together something that works.
No, absolutely. Yeah. That's the main thing is just what works, what gives you a good sound. You don't have to go crazy. When you find something that works, chances are stick with it for a really long time. If nobody's complaining, you know how to use it, you've, gotten comfortable with it. And it's important too, if you never know, you're going to have to do revisions or retakes on something that you did a year ago. It's nice to still have that same mic and that same space. Space might change and stuff, but to at least have some of the same gear, it's nice to have that available.
And that's why I love the 416 because it's so forgiving of the environment that you're in. Whereas a large diaphragm condenser, it'll pick up an ant fart from 50 feet. But the 416 is directional and it kind of blocks everything out. So it works fantastic. One thing I do want to say, though, and this is something that I talk a lot about, when I was building myself up to 6 figures, I spent several years recording in my living room with an EV-RE20, which is generally considered to be the worst voiceover mic in the history of microphones. But I darn near built my business to six figures doing that. And so, there's this myth out there that you got to have this amazing studio and you got to have this equipment and that microphone and spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And there are people that want you to believe that. And it becomes an excuse for a lot of people to just not do it. Because, I can't afford that. Well, you know what? I couldn't afford it at the beginning. And so I used what I had and I found ways to make it work. And as I grew my income, grew my client base, then I was able to make the upgrades that I wanted to. It was only 2 years ago that I was finally able to build a proper studio in my apartment. And now here I am. I've been full time. By the time my studio's done, it's going to be 2018. So, that's like 6 or 7 years full time before I finally get to build the legit dream studio that I've always wanted.
Yeah, no, that's great. That was actually going to be my next question, is if you remembered what your first studio setup was like. Because it's always interesting to hear, too, people's progression, because it is a progression. Chances are, if you really stick with it and you go full time and you make a real career out of it, you're going to upgrade along the way. But, I think people can sort of overlook the fact that you don't need to go crazy to start. You don't need to go out and, drop $1,000 on a microphone and, get a actual booth and everything. I started the same way. My first studio was a tiny little closet, blankets, pillows, clothes, that whole thing.
Yep.
Yeah, and you make it work. And I did that, for a few years, and same thing. Then you upgrade it, got a nicer interface. You just kind of grow as you go. That's, I think, the way to do it.
That's it.
Absolutely.
And, just figure out what works for you too. Like, a lot of people, when I tell them that I'm using an AG03 in my studio, they're like, what, why? Well, I don't know, because it's $150, because it's small, because it fits in my suitcase, because it does everything that I need it to do. Like, why would I spend $1,000 on a preamp when this $150 one is, I record 6 figures worth of voiceover on it every single year. So, you find what works for you and you roll with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's transition now a little bit to some marketing questions, because I know that you are a marketing expert, and it's always good to hear, marketing, it's a broad thing. There's a lot of different ways to go about marketing as a voiceover talent, a lot of different things things that work for some people, don't work for other people. So something that you know more about than I do, that I'm kind of interested in, exploring a little bit more myself, is marketing on social media, and specifically on Twitter. I've never really done that. I've never really used Twitter as a marketing platform for voiceover. So I've used Twitter. I have an account, but I've just never used it really as, to get voiceover work. So I guess my specific question would be, what are some ways to actually, and, some tips and strategies to actually get in touch with prospects? Is it as simple as just searching for them and following them, maybe sending them a direct message, or is there, something more to it than that?
Yeah, I think that it's just a matter of what people need to understand about marketing is that marketing is about relationship. It's about starting a conversation and trying to keep that conversation going. And so where I find social media can be a fantastic marketing tool is that it gives you a reason to start a conversation. So when a production company sends out a tweet with the latest video that they've created, that video that they've created now becomes an open door for you to respond to them by commenting on the fact that you watched their video. And I think where most people make the mistake is that rather than just commenting back like, hey, great job on that video, they reply back, I see you're a production company. Would you like to hire me for voiceover work? And I actually just produced a video on this topic the other day, but it kind of, I talk about it from the sense of it's like a guy who's trying to go too far on the first date, right? A real gentleman does not try to go too far on the first date. And with marketing, you shouldn't be trying to seal the deal on the first contact. Right. So social media, I think, is a great way to find leads and then to find open doors that you can use to spark those conversations. And then it becomes a tool for keeping those conversations going and finding ways for you to keep yourself top of mind without being super intrusive and annoying.
Right. Yeah. And that's a big thing too. And that is like sort of a tricky thing, is towing that line between, well, I want them to know about me. I want them to know what I do and that I'm available if they want to hire me, but I don't want to be pestering them. I don't want them to get to the point where they know me for a bad reason. And they're like, oh, that's a guy who, doesn't leave us alone or something like that. So like that's a good point though, that I didn't think about. It's just commenting and sort of, using that as almost like an introduction, just to sort of open up that channel of communication. And then, so in your experience, do some of these production companies, do they write back to you, or do they ever comment back? Like, where do things, I guess, go from there?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? There are companies that are using Twitter and their Twitter account is fully automated. So they've
Sure.
written a whole bunch of tweets and put them into some sort of software, and that software just automatically cranks out those tweets. And so you can reply to them as much as you want, but nobody's actually monitoring the account. And so in that case, it gives you ideas for ways to spark conversation, and maybe you have to spark the conversation in a different channel. But then there are other production companies who are legitimately active on Twitter. And if you engage them and engage them from a relationship standpoint versus engaging them from a please hire me for a voiceover standpoint,
Yeah.
I've found Twitter to be very effective. I picked up some amazing clients that way.
Yeah. And do you think Twitter is sort of, I mean, I'm sure they all have their charms and their merits, but do you think Twitter is kind of the strongest, I guess, social media platform compared to like LinkedIn or Facebook in terms of just, making those initial communications with prospects or clients?
I think that it depends a lot on the type of client that you're looking for. So just as an example, I find that I've picked up a lot of explainer video style production companies through Twitter, whereas for things like e-learning, I find that LinkedIn is a little bit more effective.
Okay,
And so
yeah, makes sense.
I think genre makes a difference, but it also makes a difference in the fact that, what platforms are people engaging with. And so think about it from your own personal perspective. Maybe you love to use Facebook, but you really don't like to use Twitter. Well, maybe there's somebody at the production company that really likes to use Twitter, but really doesn't like to use Facebook. And so you just try, right? You just reach out and try and find out whether or not they're going to engage back with you.
Yeah.
For companies that are active on Twitter and that are using it the way that Twitter should be used, then chances are they're going to engage with you if you're doing things the right way, and it opens up the door. And if they're not responding to you on Twitter, then maybe that's when you use what you've seen on Twitter to spark the conversation through another channel, say email.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And then, my sort of approach to marketing, and I think a lot of people's, is that it's a numbers game. You're not obviously not going to get a response and get a job from every, social media tweet, from every email, from every cold call, from every whatever. Most of them are going to go unanswered. That's kind of how it unfortunately goes. But so because of that, it is a numbers game. You want to be putting yourself out there, making as many of these contacts as possible. Do you sort of set targets for yourself or numbers like, hey, I want to hit, 50 people a week or 100 people every month or so? Do you sort of approach it that way, or are you just kind of, I'm just going to reach out to as many people as possible?
I'm very much goal-oriented, and I think that you need to be goal-oriented to be successful with this style of marketing. And because, like you said, it's absolutely 100% a numbers game. And so for my first couple of years when I was really marketing full-time, because I didn't have any jobs yet, my goal was always to hit at least 20 people a day. So that was always to try to add 20 new leads into my database every day. One of the statistics that I will share often through my blog and through some of my courses and stuff is that the averages, they say, for cold marketing, so that is when you're reaching out to somebody that you have had no previous contact with, so somebody that you don't have any kind of relationship with, that you're going to probably generate about a 10% response rate. And so if you think about that from a perspective of, well, hey, this week I sent out 10 emails. Okay, well, that means that one of those people might respond to you. And then to take it a notch further, they say that ultimately maybe 3 to 5% will convert. So you sent out 10 emails and you got one response, and 0.3 of those responses are going to turn into a booking, which, as you can see, the numbers just don't add up, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously, the more people that you're reaching out to, the more that plays into your favor. So now when you're reaching out to 100 people in a week, and maybe 10% of those people are going to respond to you, and ultimately maybe 3 to 5 of those people are going to book you for a voiceover.
Right.
And it's not an exact science, but those are sort of the averages that are attached to it for cold leads. And that's why the second most important part of the whole entire puzzle, first of all, it's the numbers, reaching out to as many people as possible. And second of all, it's having a system in place to hold yourself accountable to staying in touch with them, because it's not just about sending one email. And I think that's where a lot of people fall down too, is that they think, okay, well, I sent my email to that person and now I just wait for them to book me for a voiceover. That's not how it works. I mean, I've told stories of people that, I've kind of worked over the span of a couple of months. I have one client that I pursued back and forth for 3 years before they hired me for my first voiceover.
Wow.
And since they hired me for the first voiceover, I've probably done $10,000 or $15,000 worth of work for them.
And so are you following up with them like that? Let's use that client as an example, the one that you've, followed up or, pursued for a few years. did they express any interest from your initial contact, or were you sending a couple, follow-up emails without anything back from them at the beginning?
With that first one, I did not hear a single response. For 3 years, I did not hear a single response from them until one day, out of the blue, I received we need you to record this voiceover. Here's how much we'll pay you for it. It was the most random thing. Huh. And sometimes that's how it works.
Yeah.
But I would say that when you're not hearing back, for me, I try to make a touch again quarterly.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Like, when do you follow up again if you're not hearing anything back?
Yeah. So my big thing is you send your first email and then you send a follow-up a week later. And if you get a response, try to keep the conversation going as long as you can. If you don't get a response, then wait a quarter and try to start the conversation, try to start it all over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that makes it. So your initial contact goes out. You don't hear anything for a week. You're sending a follow-up. If you don't hear anything back from that follow-up, then maybe they go into that quarterly rotation where you're reaching out once, I guess, so 4 times a year.
Absolutely. So, okay. I mean, if you think about your own day-to-day life, how many times have you had an email come in and you've checked your phone and seen, that email came in, but you're in the middle of doing something. And so you say, I'll get to that as soon as I'm done this.
Yeah, all the time.
And then 3 days later, you're like, oh, shoot, I totally forgot to answer that email.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, we all do it every single day. And so one of the things that I say is, just because you didn't get a response to that first email that you sent doesn't mean that it's a no. It just means that there's 457,000 possible reasons why they didn't reply to you, the vast majority of which could have been they simply forgot.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've always said that I get far more conversion rate or response rate off of that second email than I ever do off the first.
Right. Yeah, because it makes sense when because I know I've from being on the other side of that. When I've been in that exact situation, I got an email and I didn't necessarily not respond because I wasn't interested. I just, got a million other things going on. Then when you get that second follow-up and it's like, it just almost puts a little more urgency on it. And it's like, oh yeah, I was going to get back to this guy. I didn't get it, or I didn't get a chance to.
It shows that you're a real person too, right? Because that's the other thing. How many random unsolicited marketing emails do you get in your inbox every single day, right? We all get a ton of them. And so when you send that secondary follow-up, it also legitimizes the fact that this is a real person.
Yeah, absolutely. And so going back to that number of like you were setting out to do maybe 20 touches a day, does that 20 include, so obviously it includes emails that you're sending. Does it include like auditions just in general? Any audition I do counts towards that, plus emails, plus cold calls? Is that like all encompassing?
I was looking for 20 leads.
Okay.
So 20 new opportunities that didn't previously exist. Now, reconnecting with people in my database, that's something totally separate. I was just looking to put 20 new opportunities in the pipeline.
Gotcha.
So if I did 10 auditions, that counted as 10 new opportunities in the pipeline.
Gotcha.
And then 10 additional leads that I found, whether it was through social media, whatever the case may be. So my whole thing was trying to put 20 new leads into the database. And I mean, if you do the math and add it all up, if you do it every day, 5 days a week, and you say you take 2 weeks of vacation in the year, so you do 5 days a week and you do it for 50 weeks out of the year, you're talking about almost 5,000 leads that you've put into your database now. And, if you do that for a year or two, you're going to build a client base for yourself. And like one of the things that I've talked about, particularly in the last month or two, was I had a crazy spring and summer. I mean, I got engaged in April and at the end of April, and then in June we put a house up for sale. We sold my wife's house at that point in time. July we got married, and then like August 1st we moved into our new house. And so basically June, July, and August I spent about an accumulative 3.5 seconds marketing my voiceover business. But I still booked almost $20,000 worth of work. And the reason why that happened was because of the first couple years when I was doing those 20 a day and building up that client base for myself. It put me into a situation where I had enough work walking through the door from repeat clients that I didn't have to stress over the fact that I didn't have time to do marketing. Now, do I go for the whole year and just sit back on autopilot? Absolutely not, because clients come and go. That's something that we all know if you've been in a business long enough. But once you can build that client base of work walking through the door, it definitely takes some of the pressure off.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And so going along too with the, the fact that it is a numbers game and it's about, getting out there as much as possible. I think especially, when you're starting out and getting into, voiceover and marketing and having your own business, it's also important to try different marketing methods and have this sort of marketing mix. Whether that be cold calls, emails, auditioning, all the different ways that you can sort of get yourself out there, social media. For you, I guess, let's say for you, like now at this stage in your career, what's your marketing mix look like? What kind of different marketing activities are you engaging in regularly?
So I kind of go from platform to platform, singular focus. So I was this year kind of putting a lot of attention into LinkedIn. And just sort of spending my days on LinkedIn and finding opportunities through LinkedIn. I've also been experimenting with some paid automated marketing opportunities, that kind of some ideas that I've come up with myself, because I'm finally at a point now where I'm comfortable to spend a little bit of money on paid advertisements and try to experiment with some ways, are there ways that I can generate leads even when I'm not in the studio? That sort of deal. So I think that rule number one is do it. That's rule number one. Yeah. How you do it doesn't really matter as much as the fact that you just quite simply do it. And I think the other thing too that's important for people to realize is that you don't have to be everywhere. You can find leads on Twitter. You can find leads on Facebook. You can find leads on LinkedIn. You can find leads through doing Google searches. I mean, every different way that you can think of, you can find leads. And so you don't have to be on every platform in order to make this work. You don't have to learn new platforms if you're not in a position where you're comfortable doing that. So the most important thing is simply that you are doing it and that you play to your strengths. Because let's be honest, sitting down in the studio for people like us who are creative people, sitting down in the studio, in the office and doing that office work sucks. It's not something that we get excited about, right? Yeah. Nobody listening right now is thinking, yay, I can't wait to go and find 20 new leads. That's just not how our brains are programmed.
Yeah.
And so in order to help make you do it, you have to play to your strengths. And so, I am not a cold caller. I am never going to be the guy that picks up the phone and starts randomly calling people.
Likewise.
But I know people who are. And I know people who are amazing at that. And so if you're a cold caller, then pick up the phone and make those cold calls. And if you love using Twitter, then get yourself on Twitter and do what you got to do and figure out how to find those leads and those opportunities on Twitter. And so if you're doing it using a method that you enjoy, that's going to make it a little bit less painful for you. Yeah. And then obviously just remembering too, why are you doing it?
Yeah, right. And looking forward to, the hopeful eventual results that are going to come from it. But but that's great, playing to your strengths. And, if you're new to it, find your strengths, try different things, see what you enjoy the most, what's showing some results, showing some progress, and, put more into that.
And that's a big part of it too, is track everything. And that's something that I teach, track everything. And if you, after a month of doing this, if you've used Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, let's say, after a month of doing it, figure out, okay, well, where did I get the most responses from? And if you got the most responses from LinkedIn, then you know what? Next month, focus more efforts on LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's huge. I'm big on that too, on tracking, as much detail and data on things as possible. Because if you're going to run some experiments and try different things like that, you can't just after a few months say, I kind of feel like, I feel like Facebook was probably the best. I'll just do that. Like you need real data to go off of if you really want to be smart about it and go about it in a practical way. So absolutely.
Absolutely.
So I think we're about ready to jump over to our audience questions. Before we do, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the other voiceover offerings and stuff that you have. So I know we've touched on it a little bit, but I know that you have some courses and you do some coaching, and you have a sort of central hub for that stuff over at marcscottcoaching.com, which there will be a link to in the show notes. But can you just also give us a little bit of a rundown of, if we go to marcscottcoaching.com, what kind of stuff do we find there?
One of the things that I found when I went full-time in 2012 was there were a lot of people that were available to teach me the performance side of voiceover, but there wasn't anybody to teach me the business side of voiceover. And I think that it's probably one of the most overlooked aspects of voiceover. In fact, when I'm asked, what is the number one piece of advice that you would give to a new voice actor? Every single time my answer is study entrepreneurship. Because you are setting up and running a small business. And so what you will find at marcscottcoaching.com are all kinds of different resources that will help you learn how to run a business. And the vast majority of it came as a result of my own trial and error and figuring things out, growing my own voiceover business. So my blog is there. And there's probably, I don't even know at this point, there's probably 5 or 6 years worth of content, generally publishing about 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And that is all free content that is just every kind of marketing and business type advice that you could ever hope for. I have tons of videos that I create, and tip videos, voiceover tip videos, usually like 2 to 5 minutes long or something like that, and try to do 1 or 2 of those a week, which you'll find at that website, also on my Facebook page. And then I also have some premium resources, which are just a result of all of the trial and error and saying, okay, well, it took me making these 500 mistakes using Twitter to figure out how to properly use Twitter. And so let me take all of that information and kind of summarize it into a 1 hour or 90-minute masterclass and make it available for people who are looking to skip the learning curve. And, if you don't want to sit there and try to figure out all this stuff on your own, or if you're really frustrated with it, one of the things that I'm really big on is just giving you practical, actionable advice. There are a lot of coaches that are kind of just like rah, like they try to pump you up sort of deal. And I mean, yeah, there's an element of that to what I do, but more than anything, it's like, okay, if this is the result you want, then this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to do it. And just sort of spelling things out exactly. Some of the resources that I have are like literally screen shares of me showing you how I'm doing it from my computer screen within my own social media profile or within the software that I'm using, so that I'm really, really big on just giving people stuff that they can sit down, watch it for an hour, watch it for 90 minutes, and start figuring this stuff out right away when they're done and start putting it to use when they're done. And so some of those premium resources are available for purchase on marcscottcoaching.com.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm big on that too, providing actionable, real information that they can not just, pump them up, which is nice, but, to also, hey, this is what you can do. Step A, B, C, you can go out and do that. That's the kind of stuff that I hope, to provide in the show and in my blog as well. So that's really great. So again, guys, that is at marcscottcoaching.com. I'll put a link in the show notes so it's nice and easy to find. So let's jump over to our audience questions for this week. So as always, we have a performance, an audio, and a business question. So we'll start with our performance question, which this week comes from Tim. And Tim asks, what are some good ways to get into character before a read so that I can avoid just being slightly different versions of the same person in every audition or job that I record? Yeah, it's a good one. So I'll let you take the first stab at that one if you have any thoughts.
I think that the most important thing is making sure that you have really, really good direction. And that's the onus on that is not exclusively on the client. So I have clients that I know what they want now. And so they just send me a script and I know exactly what they're looking for. But I have other clients where I don't know. And so in order to be able to give them what they want, I'm not afraid to ask them for a little bit more direction and not just, we want an upbeat read, but like really breaking down and understanding.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the clients that I work with on a regular basis, like I probably do 8 to 10 videos with them a month, they've gone so far as to incorporating a couple of questions that I had provided that they now give to their clients. So when they're filling out the information for what they want in their video and their voiceover, they have to answer a couple of very specific questions that provide direction so that I know exactly what they're thinking, exactly what they want to hear. And I think it's important to understand the audience that you're talking to as well. And that makes a big difference. Where are you being played? Is this audio going to be played in a corporate presentation or, like a business meeting? Or is it a fun animated explainer video that they're going to play on social media channels? So understanding that sort of stuff makes a big difference too. And so don't think that it's just on the client to give you that. If you don't have what you think you need, or if you're unclear, don't be afraid to get the client on the phone or via email and try to sort that out with them. And, I've had examples in the past too, where to make sure that I was giving them what they wanted from a character standpoint, I'll send a couple of auditions, even if they didn't ask for them. I figure it's easier for me to record a couple of 10 or 15 second auditions than it is to record the whole project and then get told, nope, that's not what we want. You got to do it over again.
Yeah, no, definitely. Something that I actually kind of did along those lines of getting better direction too is I kind of did it unintentionally actually, but I have a page, like I have my demos on my website, obviously, but then I had another page on the website with just like 10, 15, 20-second clips from different projects that I've done over the years that aren't labeled, commercial demo, this, that. Instead, they're labeled like inspirational, thoughtful, motivational. Then there's another one that's cheerful, upbeat, whatever. So when I get, somebody asking me to do a read or something like that, like if I get an email asking me to audition, what I'll do sometimes is if they don't really give good direction, I'll just give them the link to that page and say like, yeah, if you have a second, if you wouldn't mind just telling me which one of these is kind of what you're going for. And there's like 30 different samples on that page. So there's a good variety for them to choose from. And that's awesome for me because then I can have like an actual reference of something I've done myself in the past that I know that they're going for. And it's, really easy to narrow in on the style that way.
Yeah, that's good. And references too. Speaking of that, like I love it when I get a YouTube link.
Oh yeah,
or
absolutely.
An MP3 or something that says, not that we're looking for an impression, but this is kind of the feel, or this is the vibe, the tone, whatever. And I think that's really handy too.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's like, I think the best direction you can get. Like, it's always nice when they give you a good amount of descriptors as opposed to just like friendly, upbeat, which you see all the time. But if they can actually give you more description than that, that's great. But even better than that is when they could actually give you something to watch or listen to, the background music, even just any of that stuff is great.
Actually, with my explainer video clients, that's one of the things that I've done in the past is send me the background track.
Yeah.
Let me hear the background track, because immediately from the background track, I know what I got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's another point I'd make too, is like, if you want to try to get into character, if you can get the real music that's going to be used in the spot, that's great. Another thing that I'll do sometimes is, you can go to like these production music libraries where, a lot of, production companies will actually source music from. And there's, hundreds of thousands of tracks on there. So if, the description in the job post said upbeat and friendly, and that's all they give you. Okay, take that upbeat and friendly and go over to a production music library and type in upbeat and friendly and just listen to some different tracks and, get that going in your head, read along with it, just put yourself in that zone, in that space. Then, you can go ahead and record. I think that's a good way to sort of put yourself, vocally and style wise where you need to be.
Absolutely.
But thanks so much for the question, Tim. That's a great one. And let's move over to our audio question. So this week's audio question comes from Cynthia, and she asks, who can I contact, or how can I ensure that the audio quality from my home studio is up to a competitive level? So that's a question that I'm sure plenty of talent have, especially starting out. What are your thoughts on that one?
First of all, Cynthia, I respect the fact that you even asked that question, because you'd be surprised how many people just try to wing it or just assume that their audio is good enough. And so the fact that you're even asking right off the bat, that tells me that you care and that you're trying to make sure that you're putting out a professional quality product. So good on you for that, because that makes us all look better. For me personally, I worked with Uncle Roy, who that's kind of what everybody in the business knows him as, but it's Roy Yokelson of Antland Productions. He's out of New Jersey. And so what I did was, when I got my studio kind of to where I thought it needed to be, then I booked a session with Uncle Roy, and basically he had me record some different samples, and I sent him the audio that I recorded, the completely raw audio. And then from there, he's like, okay, you know what? I hear a little bit of this, so let's try moving this panel over here and moving that panel over there, and sort of work me through some of that. And then at the same time, once we got things to where we wanted from a dry, raw audio standpoint, then he was able to take some of those audio files and create some little minor processing that was basically for my voice. Mm-hmm. Things like de-essers and stuff like that were specifically for my voice and for the sound of my studio. And so, you know what, for the couple $100 that it cost me to do that, it was absolutely worth every single dime that I spent. And I think that if you are going to call yourself a professional voice actor, there are a couple of things that you can't cheap out on, and the quality of your sound and making sure that it's where it needs to be is absolutely one of those things that you cannot cheap out on. So going to an expert like Uncle Roy, or Dan Leonard is another one that's out there. George Whittam is a name that comes up a lot of times. Dan Friedman is another name. There are people out there that can help you with this sort of stuff. And so turning to them and spending a little money and seeking their advice is absolutely going to pay dividends for you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, if you're going to be full-time, if you're going to be serious about it, and you're not an audio engineer, you don't have a background in that kind of stuff, it's all kind of new and foreign to you, then that's, I think that's something that you should definitely look into, is having a professional engineer assess your studio. And a lot of, I was going to also mention Dan Leonard and George Whittam. There's a ton of other guys out there. What I'll do actually is in the show notes, I'll put a bunch of links for you guys if you want to, check out some of these engineers that offer these kinds of services. But you could also, just Google, home studio review, audio engineer, voiceover, that kind of stuff. I'm sure there's plenty of people who offer those services. But yeah, if I was fortunate that I came from like an audio engineering background. So I had that sort of things down, and the performance side of things was where I needed to sort of learn and grow. But if you're coming sort of from the other way, and maybe you have some performance chops already, and now you have to sort of learn, all right, how do I set up a studio? What gear do I need? Then it definitely makes sense to sort of go to a professional. If you were looking for some things on your own that you can do, I would say, you can compare just sort of your dry voiceover reads to that of, pro talents that are out there. Again, if you're not an audio engineer, you're going to want a professional set of ears on your stuff. But if you're just looking for like a quick way just to sort of get like a ballpark, how am I doing? You can get like an e-learning reel or a narration reel or just something from a pro talent that has just voice, no sound effects, no music, and then throw that into your DAW or your audio software and play a sample of theirs and play a sample of yours. Use good monitors, good headphones, and what do you hear? How's your background noise compared to their background noise? How's your volume compared to their volume? Just the overall quality of the audio, and you can sort of approach things that way.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned, which is absolutely essential, is making sure that if you're going to do it that way, that you do have a good set of studio monitors to do that.
Yeah,
you can't just pop in your iPhone earbuds no. and sort of assess the sound that way. Although that said, I do think it's important to listen to audio both on top quality, professional monitors and also computer speakers, because depending on the kind of work you're doing, a lot of people are going to be listening on computer speakers. And so you want to make sure that it does sound good both ways.
Yeah. If you're listening for like critical listening, analytical stuff, that's where you're going to use your nice headphones and your studio monitors. If you just want to get a feel of how is this going to translate, to 90% of the audience that's going to be listening to it, then you can, listen to your computer speakers, your earbuds, that kind of thing as well. But that's a great question. I'm sure a question that many, many talent have. So let's jump over to our last question for this episode, which is our business question. And it comes from Susan. And Susan asks, what's a good system for keeping on the radar of prospects and leads without getting annoying or becoming bothersome? It feels awkward to just reach out every few months with nothing to say other than, hey, just a reminder that you can hire me. So we kind of touched on this stuff, I think, a little bit in our initial conversation. But do you want to kind of recap anything or add anything else?
Yeah, the first thing I will say is great question, Susan, and don't ever reach out to anybody and say, hey, just a reminder you can hire me.
Definitely not.
Don't do, but you'd be amazed at how many people do, and that's probably why you're not getting hired. So what it goes back to what we talked about earlier in the podcast, which was simply you're building a relationship. And so that relationship isn't completely centered around you. In fact, it should be very much focused on the client and on what they need. And so that's where social media can come into play. Have they posted a new blog lately that you can leave a comment on? Mm-hmm. Because as soon as you leave a comment on that blog, you've instantly brought yourself top of mind without being annoying. They put that blog out there for people to consume, for people to share, for people to comment on. And so if you do that, genuinely comment on the blog, don't comment, by the way, you can hire me for a voiceover.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? It's understanding that every communication doesn't have to be a pitch. In fact, very seldom should your communications involve a pitch. Once you've made that introduction, they are well aware that you are a voice actor. If they have told you up front that they've listened to your demo or that they'd like to add you to their roster, they are well aware that you are a voice actor. So now at this point, it's simply a matter of staying top of mind. And to do that, you do not need to sell your services. So engage with them in the places that they are making themselves available to be engaged with. Leave a comment on something that they've posted on Facebook. Leave a comment on a video that they've shared on YouTube. If they've, tweeted a really great blog post or tweeted a really great article, retweet that or leave a comment to that. And simply by doing that, you are bringing yourself top of mind again without being annoying. And every few months, I do reach out via email just to say, hey, it's been a while since we last had a conversation, or it's been a while since we chatted last. Are you working on anything new? And that's it. That's my whole email. And I've ended the email with a question, which opens the door for a conversation. Right. So they'll get back to me. Yeah, we are, in fact. Or, we just did this project or whatever. And so it opens the door to communication. That is how you do it without being annoying. If you want to be annoying, then you constantly sell your services. If you want to do it without being annoying, then you just build a relationship.
Yeah. And that's a good point too that you made, is just, you keep the email short. If, they get an email from you and they open it up and it's like a novel and they're like, oh, do I got to read this whole thing and see what this person's saying? Just, you don't have to write, a whole, 10 paragraph email. It can be short. It can be to the point. And yeah, and like I think like we said earlier on, keep it human, be real, don't make it seem automated and stuff. And I would say that probably goes for the social media post too. If they post a blog or something or a video or something and you comment, don't just write cool and then just like leave it at that, like be a person, write something, comment on what was actually in that blog post or actually in that video or whatever it is that they did. Yeah.
It's not enough to simply like a post on Facebook. If you want to stand out, you comment on a post on Facebook.
Yeah.
And you just think about that from your own personal perspective. What gets your attention more when you share something on Facebook? What gets your attention more, the person who liked or the person who commented?
Yeah, absolutely.
We always go to check out the comments, and sometimes we reply to the comments. And so it works the same way when you flip the tables. So don't just leave the like, and that works on LinkedIn as well. Don't just like it, comment on it.
Yeah. And if it's like a really popular post and something too, it might have hundreds of likes, and they're probably not sifting through all that and looking at everybody's name and being like, oh yeah, this guy, I haven't hired him for a voiceover in a while. Let me get back to him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you got to stand out. If you're looking for, things that you can write them emails about, because again, like we said, you don't want to just send an email being like, hey, haven't heard from you in a while, I'm available if you want to hire me. Some things that I've done, because I've cast voiceover talent for projects, and what I'll get sometimes from some of them is like an out of studio notice. So like if they're going on vacation or away, I'll just get a heads up like, hey, I'm out of the studio Thursday and Friday. If you need anything, just let me know by Wednesday. Otherwise, I'll be back Monday, whatever, something like that. Yeah, and it's there's a purpose to that email. It's not just to sell themselves, and it reminds me of them if I haven't talked to them in a while, haven't got an audition from them in a while. So that's something that you can think about doing. And then the kind of the obvious ones, if you have a new demo reel, some sort of notable project or something, you can include that in like your quarterly touches or whatever, however many months you put in between. I wouldn't send out an email every time you do a project or something like that. I think that goes back to being a little bit too salesy, a little bit too much, because even though you're not saying, hey, you can hire me, if they're getting an email, I don't know, every few weeks or even once a month, it kind of becomes clear why you're sending that email so often and what you're doing there.
This is one of the things actually that I find very amusing about voice actors, because this is something that's all through our industry, but it's like, a doctor doesn't post on Facebook every time he performs a surgery.
Yeah, right.
The pizza delivery guy doesn't post on Twitter every time he delivers a pizza. It's their job. It's what they do. And, booking and recording voiceovers is our job. It's what we do. And so we shouldn't, to me anyway, I'm not really sure why we feel the need to constantly promote that fact or use that as a means of promotion. I would prefer to just keep working. And if my clients aren't hearing from me, I want them to just assume that I'm booking voiceovers. So,
yeah,
but I mean, yeah, if you book something major or have something significant like that, like last year I got nominated for a Voice Arts Award. And so I absolutely sent an email out to my clients saying, talking about the fact that I was nominated from a Voice Arts Award.
Yeah.
But also when I did it, I was talking about it more from their perspective than my own perspective, like giving my clients the opportunity to know that their voice actor was nominated for a voice.
That's a great
we're
point.
working
Yep.
with a guy that, oh yeah, we got a guy that does our projects. He was nominated for an award, and it makes them sound better, right? And so going at it from that perspective versus trying to make myself sound cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, a good way to approach, any of this kind of stuff is how can you help them? How can you make them look good? How can you make things easy for them as opposed to just, look how great I am. look what I can do and that kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just one last point I'll make about like touch emails and that kind of thing is I personally try to avoid holidays. I mean, that's obviously a big one that people will do, like, hey, happy Halloween, check out some recent voiceover work. Hey, Merry Christmas. Here's some recent voiceover work. And the reason is just because, a lot of people do that, and it goes back to standing out and, having them see you and remember you. So, you could try it, and see if you get good results. And I'm sure some people do get good results doing that. I've just kind of always tried to stay away from that. But if it's been like, it's been 4 months or whatever, and I haven't really reached out to people and I don't have anything, too notable that I can share. I don't have a new demo reel, so I don't really have a, purpose to reach out specifically. But, holidays coming up, then sure, you if you need something like that. But I would try to stay away from like every major holiday sending an email, because you're going to be buried and you might not even get those emails opened or not responded to. So, I think there's better points in time to touch with clients and prospects.
One of the most successful sales campaigns that I ever did was on Groundhog Day. And that's just because It's one of the few holidays left that people
That's
don't
funny.
actually have a sale for. Like everybody and their grandma doesn't have a Groundhog Day sale type deal.
Right.
And so, the other thing from a holiday standpoint, there's those calendars that exist that are like, because there's a holiday, I use air quotes every 300, like for all 365 days of the calendar year.
True.
But the holiday might be like, I saw one on Facebook today that was something about tomorrow's National Slap Your Coworker Day.
Right.
So you if you're going to do something like that, look for something that's kind of fun, that's going to make people smile, that's going to make them laugh, versus just sending them out the Merry Christmas, which, as much as I will say Merry Christmas to everyone, but nowadays you got to be careful because you send a Merry Christmas to the wrong person and you actually did more harm than good, because now you've offended them, because everybody's offended by everything. So
Right.
you look for ways to make it a little bit more fun. But the most important thing is with any of these things is that it's not about you, it's about them.
Yeah.
And so that's where I always say it comes back to, okay, well, it's been 3 months since I had a contact with this person and I need to make a contact with this person. Rather than just sending them an email and trying to generate some work from it, that's where you spend 5 minutes, do a little bit of research, find out what they've posted recently on social media, check out the new project that they did. And now your email to them becomes, hey, it's been a while since we had a conversation, but I just saw the video that you did for such and such on YouTube and wanted to say that you did a fantastic job. Hope everything's well with you. Have a great day. And that's it.
Yep.
That's your email. You showed some genuine interest. You paid a compliment. It was about them. It wasn't about you. You didn't try to sell them anything. That's how you're going to book voiceover work.
Yeah. And even though, you do have the intention to, get back on their radar and, ultimately you do want to get more work from them and, get more jobs out of them from sending those kinds of emails, it's if you do it in that way and you do it from a way of helping them and, being a real person and, writing something relevant to something that they posted, people will respond to that. And you'll be surprised, like the kinds of genuine, thankfulness people will show when you send them those kind of emails. If you've never sent an email like that before, you might think like, yeah, they're not going to really care about this. They're not going to want to hear an email, but try a couple of them and you'll probably be surprised at the kind of responses you get. I was when I first started doing that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Those are some of the most effective emails that I send.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much, Susan, for that question and for everyone who submitted questions for this episode. A lot of great stuff there. And I guess before we wrap up, Mark, is there anything you want to add? Just any additional points on anything we talked about or anything we didn't talk about? Just anything that you might want to say.
Yeah, I mean, I like to make myself available, and I'm trying to create a lot of content on a regular basis. And so when I'm, posting 3 blogs a week and trying to post a video or 2 every week and trying to keep things fresh on my Facebook page as well, one of the places that I get the inspiration for a lot of that content is from the emails that I receive from people. And chances are, if you're asking a question or having a question, there are a lot of other people that probably have that same question. Mm-hmm. And so I absolutely invite that. So, if you've got a marketing business type question or, any kind of voiceover question that you want to have answered, send me an email to mark@markscottvoiceover.com. I absolutely do the best that I can to respond to every one of them personally. And, if you don't maybe get that personal response right away, I always try to take those questions and answer them on my blog or through the videos that I do, just so that I'm always putting valuable content out there that is genuinely going to help you with your business.
Yeah, that's great. It's very generous with your time. That's nice. Again, thank you everybody so much for submitting questions, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I got a lot out of it, so I hope you guys did as well. And just another big thank you so much, Mark, for coming on and for sharing all this great information. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it too. It's been great.
All righty. Talk soon. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 12. And thank you again to Mark for his time and for coming on the show. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I really did. And I got a lot out of speaking with Mark myself. So I hope it was a great episode for you guys as well. Again, if you'd like to submit a question for a future episode of the show, you can do that at voiceoverroadmap.com/questions. And the show notes for this episode will be at voiceoverroadmap.com/012. So thanks again, guys, so much for listening and for following along. And if you're a newer listener, please go back and listen to some of the older episodes. There's a lot of great content and a lot of great guest hosts and a lot of great audience questions. So if you haven't listened to all the episodes yet, I'd highly suggest that you do. I'm sure you'll get a lot out of them. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in and for following along, and we'll see you next week.